See all of you. I will call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 10 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Pursuant to Standing Order 108-3G, the committee is meeting in public today to study Report 2, Student Financial Assistance of the 2020 Spring Reports of the Auditor General of Canada. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, pursuant to the House Order of September 23, 2020. And to ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules as follows. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice for those who are participating virtually. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. Before speaking, click on the microphone icon to activate your own mic. When you are done speaking, please put your mic on mute to minimize any interference. Unless there are exceptional circumstances, the use of headsets with a boom microphone is mandatory for everyone participating remotely. Should any technical challenges arise, please advise the chair. Please note that we may need to suspend a few minutes as we need to ensure all members are able to participate fully. For those participating in person, masks are required unless seated and when physical distancing is not possible. Should you wish to get my attention, signal the clerk and with a hand gesture. Should you wish to raise a point of order, please activate your microphone and indicate to me clearly that you wish to raise a point of order. With regard to a speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do our best to maintain a consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether you are participating virtually or in person. I will now turn to our witnesses. Welcome. Joining us today from the Office of the Auditor General of Canada, we have the Auditor General, Karen Hogan, Matthew Lequain, Director, and Philippe Legoff, Principal. From the Canada Revenue Agency, we have Bob Hamilton, Commissioner of Revenue and Chief Executive Officer, and Mark Lemieux, Assistant Commissioner, Collections and Verification Branch. From the Department of Finance, we have Graham Flack, Deputy Minister, Employment and Social Development, Atik Rahman, Acting Assistant Deputy Minister, Learning Branch, and Mark Perlman, Chief Financial Officer and Senior Assistant Deputy Minister. And from the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, Judith Robertson, Commissioner. For those of you who are making presentations, you will have 5 minutes to make your opening statements, and we'll begin with Ms. Hogan. Ms. Hogan, you have the floor.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, thank you for this opportunity to discuss a report on student financial assistance, which was tabled in Parliament in July 2020. Joining me today are Philippe Legoff, who was the principal responsible for the audit, and Mathieu Lequin, who led the audit team. At the time of our audit, the federal government had 2 programs to help students obtain financial assistance to attend college or university. These are the Canada Student Loans Program and the Canada Education Savings Program. The government considers this type of assistance to be an essential investment in Canada's labour force and economic growth. This audit is important because there is a significant cost to the government when student loans are not repaid. In the 2018-19 fiscal year, that cost reached $500 million, and the Chief Actuary of Canada predicted that the value of unpaid student loans will continue to grow. Our report does not cover any assistance to students related to the pandemic as it was completed in December 2019. However, the pandemic is a compounding factor that has come into play since we issued our report. It may well cause labour market conditions to worsen, thereby limiting prospects for young adults. This might jeopardize their ability to repay their federal student loans, and the value of unpaid and defaulted student loans reported earlier in the year would increase. Overall, We found a number of areas in which Employment and Social Development Canada could improve how it manages student financial assistance. On the loan side of student financial assistance programs, we found that the department did not properly check that information on applications to the repayment assistance plan was accurate, such as income. The department has known about this integrity problem and about the resulting risks that ineligible students might participate in the plan since 2015. At the time of our audit, the department did not have access to the Canada Revenue Agency's tax information to verify applicants' income, a practice that is used at the provincial level and that the department recognizes to be valuable.
2018, 24% of borrowers whose student loans were due were participating in the repayment assistance plan. That translates into more than 200,000 borrowers who were struggling to repay their student loans, with a total loan value of $3.6 billion. Almost 9 out of 10 participants in the repayment assistance plan were making no payments. We found that Employment and Social Development Canada did not offer enough tools to help students understand their financial obligations under the Canada Student Loans Program, despite recommendations from the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada to make this sort of information available. Financial literacy is important, as for some students, this is the first large financial commitment of their lives. We also found that the Canada Revenue Agency did not have the tools it needed to maximize recovery once borrowers defaulted and student loans were transferred to the agency for collection. For example, the agency was using Employment and Social Development Canada's information system, which made it impossible for the agency to know exactly how much money was recovered by its own different activities and collection methods. Finally, on the savings side of the Student Financial Assistance Program, we found that the government invested $1.1 billion in Canada Education Savings Program in 2018, but low-income families did not fully participate in the program. For example, even though the Canada Learning Bond is paid by the government without any contribution from families, about 62% of eligible children did not receive it as of 2018 because no account had been opened for them. In our view, it's important that Employment and Social Development Canada undertake an evaluation that considers both the loans and the savings components of federal student financial assistance. This type of comprehensive review would work to ensure that the system is consistent and effective in achieving the objectives of promoting access to and completion of post-secondary education. We made 5 recommendations to Employment and Social Development Canada, and the department has provided us with an action plan. The committee may wish to ask the department what progress it has made to address our recommendations. Madam Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. We'd be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
I'm sorry, you probably didn't pick that up. Thank you very much, Ms. Hogan. We will now go to Mr. Hamilton for 5 minutes.
Okay, merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to appear before you to discuss this report. And as you said, I'm accompanied by Mark Lemieux, Assistant Commissioner of the Collections and Verifications Branch at the Canada Revenue Agency. In Report 2, the audit on the financial assistance focused on Employment and Social Development Canada and did analyze student loan activity and adjusted procedures accordingly to maximize the funds recovered for the federal government.
That the CRA did not have the necessary tools to maximize recovery of student loans in default. The methods available for the agency to recover student loans were more limited than those available to the agency under the Income Tax Act. In the report, the Auditor General of Canada made 5 recommendations. None are addressed to the CRA. one audit recommendation does mention the CRA, and to address that specific audit recommendation, ESDC is working with us to establish an information sharing agreement expected by spring of 2021. This will enable CRA to strengthen verification of borrower marital status, income, spousal income, and number of dependents against tax data during the repayment assistance plan application process. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hamilton. We will now move to Mr. Flack.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The report's recommendations align with our continuous work to strengthen the Canada Student Loans Program while making post-secondary education more affordable and accessible to all Canadians. The government has made significant investments in recent years, including increasing grants, the Canada Student Grants, and expanding its eligibility to make post-secondary education more affordable. Since the onset of the pandemic, the government has taken measures to address the impacts of COVID-19 on students. This included temporarily suspending the repayment of student loans and applicable interest, and doubling Canada's student grants for the current school year.
Over the years to make student loan repayment more manageable. The most notable of this was in Budget 2008, where the government announced the introduction of the Repayment Assistance Plan, which subsequently was approved by Parliament and implemented in 2009. RAP is a form of income contingent repayment system that allows student borrowers to repay only what they can reasonably afford given their income and family size. And the government contributes to their payments such that the loan is paid off within 15 years of leaving school. In 2016, the government made it more generous by increasing the zero payment income threshold to $25,000. This is a benefit, effectively like a deferred grant, and should not be viewed as a loss. In fact, the department has made and continues to make efforts to raise awareness of RAP so that eligible borrowers can take advantage of it while they're trying to integrate into the labor market but do not yet have sufficient revenues. Spending on the RAP is very different from the write-off loss due to default, and therefore we report separately on the two in the public accounts. Parliament has chosen to use grants to help students in financial needs and the RAP as a means to assist students in precarious financial situations to repay their loans. We agree with the OAG that we can improve informing Parliament on program costs, and we are already taking steps to do so. However, we intend to continue reporting program spending such as the RAP and write-off loss separately. Même si nous avons fait du grand...
While we have made great strides, we know that there is still more work to do. We acknowledge the longer-term issues raised by the Office of the Auditor General. We agree with the recommendations, and we are taking action to address them. Student loan repayment continues to be one of the priorities for the Canada Student Loans Program. Our efforts in this area need to be coordinated with the provinces as well as other delivery partners. However, this takes time, and given the work the department has already undertaken, we're confident we'll be able to implement our action plan, though some of the timelines may need to be reassessed due to the pandemic. With respect to student financial literacy, we agree with the OAG that more needs to be done to improve financial literacy among young Canadians. To this end, Employment and Social Development Canada, in consultation with the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, has developed a financial literacy plan in 2017 to inform borrowers of their payment obligations and provide them with financial literacy tools. Since the audit, the department has already launched a virtual repayment counselor on the National Student Loan Service Centre web portal. We continue to add new content to better describe repayment options. The department also has a plan to consult with provincial partners and external stakeholders on mandatory financial counseling for borrowers.
Recommended a comprehensive evaluation of both the Canada Student Loan Program and the Canada Education Savings Program. While our ongoing evaluation work has focused on the impact of the two programs individually, the department has been working with Statistics Canada for several years now on developing appropriate data sets that would allow us to do a comprehensive evaluation to examine the interaction between these two programs. And after much technology and privacy work to link those data sets, that has now been completed. And our first evaluation of the interactions between the program, the Education Savings Program and the Canada Student Loan Program is underway. With better understanding, we will be able to take appropriate steps to reduce financial barriers to students. All the efforts we have been undertaking have ensured that the default rate on student loans continues to decline from a high of 28% in 2003-04 to its current all-time low of 8%. Some of this success can be attributed to the Repayment Assistance Program, which provides support to borrowers in financial difficulty so they can get back on their feet and focus on their careers. The use of this model is, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flack. Your 5 minutes is up, and I will now turn to Ms. Robertson for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning. Je vous remercie, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the Standing Committee for the invitation to appear before you today.
of Canada is a federal agency that operates independently, and we are primarily funded by the financial institutions that we regulate. Our mandate is to protect financial consumers in Canada, and we do that in two principal ways. First, we supervise the federally regulated financial entities, primarily banks, for their compliance with the consumer protection measures and legislation. Second, we strengthen the financial literacy of Canadians through programs, tools, and resources to help them make informed financial decisions, as informed consumers are better protected consumers. In addition, we undertake research and experimentation to provide the evidence to support these efforts. All of this work is carried out in close collaboration with many organizations and individuals in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. This enables us to extend our reach and our impact across the country. As you know, financial literacy is a vital skill that people develop and augment as they go through the various stages of life. And starting young makes a difference. So we undertake various activities focused on helping people develop good financial habits early in life. For example, young Canadians were a key target audience of ours during the 10th Annual Financial Literacy Month, which just wrapped up yesterday. And we hosted a webinar in collaboration with the Canadian Bankers Association that targeted young graduates. We've also developed and piloted educational training materials for post-secondary students in collaboration with the Canadian Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators and Colleges and Institutions Canada. And we chair a federal government committee of departments and agencies, which includes the SDC, that exchanges information and coordinates efforts on financial literacy. These are just a few examples of how FCAC is helping advance financial literacy. And as you can see, collaboration is central to our efforts, and our partnerships have proven to be a successful way to develop and deliver financial education initiatives. Turning to the Auditor General's report, FCAC welcomes the recommendation that involves our efforts to strengthen the financial literacy of post-secondary students in collaboration with the SDC. FCAC and the Canada Student Loans Program team have a long-standing and positive relationship. Our joint focus is to help student loan borrowers improve their financial literacy and better manage their finances. As discussed in the Auditor General's report, our two organizations have been working together to include the financial literacy tools and information in ESDC's National Student Loan Service Center portal. And we are pleased to report that over the past year, FCAC's education materials have been added to the student loan portal, as well as to the personal dashboards of student borrowers. These include links to FCAC's budget planner, information on how loans and credit cards work, and consumer rights related to credit products. There are also tips on paying back student loans and setting up an emergency fund. Going forward, we will continue to build on our close partnership with ESDC and support its efforts to make enhancements and integrate new content into the portal. In closing, I'd like to bring your attention to the fact that we recently announced the launch of public consultations to renew our national strategy for financial literacy. The first national strategy was adopted in 2015 and successfully laid a roadmap to where we are today. And these consultations for a new strategy will help us plan for the future. We invite anyone interested to share their ideas. FCAC is committed to continue to advancing financial literacy in Canada with the support of federal government partners like ESDC and other stakeholders. This completes my opening statement, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Merci.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all our witnesses for your opening statements. We will now go to our first round of questioning, which is 6 minutes, and we will start with Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for all of our guests for being here. Really appreciate your time. I know during the pandemic it's particularly difficult to get time away for a committee, but we do appreciate it, and I do think it's important. So I'm going to start with yourself, Mr. Flack. When we look at the repayment assistance plan recipients, they're required to submit monthly pay stubs, but they're not required to file annual tax return, as is the case in the Ontario program. During this pandemic, the government has often required businesses and nonprofits who are struggling through some of the most difficult times of their lives to have income tax returns. Why is the reasoning that these business owners are forced to file their tax returns and show their tax returns before they can be helped? However, we don't require this of the repayment assistance plan.
Under the RAP, Madam President, the way it operates is it largely deals with individuals who face sudden income loss. And for sudden income loss, the income tax return from the previous year that CRA has is not actually useful for us in determining that. So for example, if we had someone who lost their job today and applied under the RAP, even if I had access to Bob's data at CRA, the data would be for their 2019 tax year, and it would not allow me to evaluate whether they were eligible for the repayment assistance program. Because we have to do that evaluation based on their income in the previous month. That's the way the program is structured. It's not retrospective looking at their income in the previous year, because indeed their income the previous year would have been higher to be able to do that. So that's why for individuals who suffer that sudden loss, we have to use pay stubs and other methods to assess whether they're doing that. Where the CRA data would be very useful for us is looking retrospectively, where you have individuals in the program for a longer period of time. So the government has never, since the program was set up in 2008, looked at making it obligatory for individuals to file taxes. The rules around filing taxes are rooted in whether an individual has sufficient income. So for example, if they had no income, there would be no obligation to file the taxes, and we would have to find another way. But that's something we can certainly look into. It's just not something that's been in place since Mr. Solberg set up the program in 2008.
So to be clear, I understand the program. If the person had made $1 million in 2019, in 2020 they lost their job January 1, they would still be eligible for the RAP program. Is that correct?
Atik, can I just turn to you on that? I don't believe there's an asset test.
That is exactly correct, Madam Chair. It's based on income. It's not based on their savings or assets. So if somebody loses their income, they become eligible at that point.
Okay, so an individual who is only making $15,000 per year, but hasn't had, or I should say $30,000 a year in the previous year, hasn't had the income drop, but the person who made $1 million in 2019, who did have the income, the person making $30,000 would not be eligible, but the person who made $1 million in the year previous would be. Is that correct?
They could be eligible depending on whether they have family members. So we look at two factors. 25,000 is if they're single, but if they have additional family members, I think the number is higher. It's closer to 59,000, I think.
But you understand my point there. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Flagg. Now, just moving on from there, so there is, as I believe Mr. Hamilton referred to, an income sharing agreement that's supposed to be, or information, sharing agreement that's supposed to be in place the spring of this year. And Mr. Flagg, you equivocated there a little bit. Will we have that plan in place by the spring? And what is the spring exactly? Is that March, May, or when is that of 2021?
Yeah, we have a tentative agreement now, and the target is to get that signed in March. I just point out the reason it's taken time is we had to negotiate this with the provinces as well because they needed to be supportive of this. But the other reason this has taken time is because that information, that sensitive tax information, will be accessed by a third-party provider who provides the loans. And that has resulted in some extensive consultations with CRA to ensure that we have the full integrity of that information protected. So that's been the reason for the delay.
Okay. And just moving on there again to you, Mr. Flagg. Sorry, there I'm taking up a lot of your time here. The Auditor General has noted that over 20% of borrowers under the student loans program made no repayments, highlighting that there are obviously some major issues in the program. Your department has committed to an information. So that's what I wanted to focus on there. So we're at 20%. What is the target? Are we still at 20% with the COVID? With COVID, have that number gotten worse? I sort of assume it would be. And what is our target there number? What's the number we want to get to? What are other jurisdictions at?
Yeah, so in fact, there is not a target around that because the program is designed as what we call an automatic stabilizer. So in the event, for example, of a recession, one would expect to see younger people losing their jobs in greater numbers than others, and one would expect to see temporarily much higher resort to the program. So I think the repayment program was a deliberate design by Parliament to say, in the case where a large group of individuals get into serious difficulty financially because of the broader economic effects, the government shall provide more support. It's not unlike the employment insurance system. We don't have a target on a given year for what it is. It's an entitlement based on income. So the numbers of people who are not repaying the loans reflects the fact that those individuals are below the income threshold that Parliament has set, for which those individuals are entitled to, in effect, a deferred grant to cover the costs of their loans.
Excuse me, I know I'm running short of time. Can I get one more, Madam Chair, or no? Okay.
I'm very sorry. You're at 6 minutes and 2 seconds.
I want Mr. Longfield back.
We will move on to Mr. Fergus.
Bonjour.
Good morning, and thank you, Madam Chair. And good morning to our witnesses. And it's a pleasure to see you again, Ms. Hogan. Listen, my questions pertain to the relationship. I'll say it in English.
Accountability of the recipient of the loans as to the department, and the relationship between that in terms of falling into default or being delinquent on their loans. And I know that the Auditor General, if we take a look at recommendation 2.35, that in order to prompt borrowers to be more diligent about repaying their student debt, ESDC should inform credit bureaus about student debts in default. Madam Hogan, I would like to know is that, well, I guess the question is, are there a lot of students who are defaulting on their debts? And a lot of students, I'm just thinking back to the time when I was young, wasn't perhaps the most responsibly financial person that there is. Would you find that there would be a better solution than reporting them to the credit agency and having, or to the credit bureau, which would, of course, put a stain on their credit record, which can carry forward as they're just starting in life and starting their careers?
So I agree with you. A better solution would be to ensure that they are well educated on financial obligations and what they've agreed to when they enter the student loans program. An item to note is that for the first 6 months post-education, there is no expectation of payments. Then if payments do not begin, a loan is delinquent after that 6-month period. During the delinquent period, they are reported to the credit bureau. Then if it extends beyond that, so I think it's about 9 months after, they would be
days,
considered in default, and then in default, they're no longer reported to the credit bureau. So we were looking for some consistency in the treatment, but as you say, I think financial literacy education is a best place for the government to start.
So then that would take my next. Thank you for that. And then my next question would be then to the FCAC. What progress can you report? I guess I have two questions for them. So first one, what progress can you report regarding providing ESDC with access to education materials for inclusion on the web portal? And my second question is a little bit more qualitative. What sense do you have that providing that more information has led to better outcomes? Do you have any data on that front which would point to that the default rate or the default rate would be lower or the repayment rate would be higher when students are provided with a more of an informed choice as to what they're undertaking when they have these loans?
Thank you. Happy to respond to this question. So for the first part is on the progress. We're actually very happy to report the progress that has been made. It has been made in stages where it is links to the various materials that we already have on our website, many of which are designed specifically for students. But in addition, one of the things that I would point to that we think is quite pertinent to this population is the link to our budget planner, which is a tool we introduced last year and is a very simple, easy to use planning tool, really. I know budgets tend to be a bit non-sexy, but it incorporates behavioral insights and prompts and nudges. And so we're really looking forward to this as a way to see the...
Sorry to interrupt. Do you have any early data as to whether or not it has led to less of a default or delinquency in terms of paying back their loans?
So I don't have any specific data on the impact on the student loans, but evaluation is something that we do for all of our tools over time. As I said, this was just introduced a year ago, so we're looking forward to conducting those evaluations.
My wife made me familiar with a great line saying that in theory there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. I'm wondering, do you have any data on other programs where you saw that where people had informed themselves that they come from a certain population group that you've seen better results in terms of them being able to pay back the monies that they owe?
We do. We had some really interesting research that we published last year and that we continue to build on, which is identifying specific behaviors that make a difference in what we call sort of financial well-being. So this is self-reported. And a couple behaviors really shone as making a difference independent of the level of income. Of course, now we're not talking about subsistence. We're talking about where people do have income. And budgeting was one of the key ones. Those who planned for expenses and purchases and kept track really made a significant difference in their self-assessment. The second one was generating a emergency fund or a reserve fund, having some reserve to fall back on so that you weren't required to borrow in an unanticipated or unplanned way.
Thank you very much for that. We will now move on to Mr. Blanchette-Jonca.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to take my time to say how uncomfortable I was made by Mr. Fergus's intervention. He said, maybe I should say this in English, it made me uncomfortable as if the French language was something that was from another planet and it wouldn't be possible for the committee members and witnesses to understand. As a Quebecer, whose language is French, I have no fears to express myself in French. And I would hope that my colleagues wouldn't have this fear to express in either of Canada's official languages. I simply wanted to say this at the start of my intervention on a point of privilege.
A point of order, Mr. Fergus?
Yes, oui, Madame la Présidente.
Yes, Madam Chair. The reason why I switched my comments from French to English is that because the document that I had read, unfortunately, well, it's one I read in English. Not unfortunately, but I read it in English. So the reason why I did that, if I'm not able to do a free translation, that's why I changed. That's the only reason I did this. And Mr. Jonca, or Mr. Blanchet-Jonca, we have a good relationship, and I would like him to understand that that's the only reason why I switched. And that what he said hurts me somewhat. He said that I don't respect the French language. It was just simply for that. The technical term was in English in my head, and that's the reason why I express myself in English.
Fergus,
Madame la Présidente, je vais...
Madam, on a point of privilege, Madam Chair, I would like to say to my colleague that I didn't have bad intentions here, but I didn't say that he didn't respect the French language. I said that I felt some discomfort at the start of his intervention, and I understand. I appreciate his clarification, but I have a lot of difficulty with the fact that we claim that we're the critic for something that, and I'd like to, and I don't want this to interfere with my speaking time. We're here to talk about the Auditor General's report. So welcome to the witnesses.
Very much, Mr. Blanchet-Jonca.
Oui.
I've been able to confer with the clerk, and these are not points of order. I appreciate that you have expressed your opinions, but as you appear to be ready to do so, we will move back onto the questionings. We did stop the clock, so we will start the clock now. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for that clarification. And so if we go back to the original subject with respect to the Auditor General's report, clearly Quebec has its own financial assistance program. But what the OAG has showed in its report is that the federal financial assistance program, which students from the other provinces use, has some shortcomings when it comes to collection of debts. The students don't really understand their financial obligations, even if it doesn't really have an impact on the Quebec students. I would say that we are still taxpayers. And the Auditor General said that there was $2.4 billion in arrears. So when this happens, all of the taxpayers have to pay for it. Ms. Hogan, in your opening statement on point 6, you talked about the fact that the department was aware of certain problems with integrity and whether or not students were eligible for to this student aid program, and that the department didn't verify all of the information on the applications, and that it wasn't possible to do this. At the time of the audit, people didn't have the information to verify the income of applicants, which is a shortcoming that applies to the other provinces. Can you tell us what CRA should do in order to let us fill out these applications properly? Thank you for your question. What we noted is that in determining eligibility, in looking at income that a borrower has to have, we noted that, and even the department noted this, that some borrowers had incomes above this threshold. But so this was the information that was missing. So we were encouraging some information sharing with CRA, as the other witness mentioned. They're looking at this as well. So we have to follow up on this, and we have to look at previous income tax returns, and in order to determine eligibility. And this should continue so long as the person is receiving assistance. Just an observation, we know that education is under provincial jurisdiction. So logically speaking, these loans programs should cover the province. But since Premier Johnson in Quebec, Quebec has looked after its own program, do you think that there's too much administrative hierarchy that complicates the process, which leads to situations that you pointed out in your report? That's a little difficult to answer that question. It's more of a political question when it comes to determining who manages a student program. I think that EDC could benefit from having more information in order to understand why students in the RAP program do not pay back. We need a more in-depth analysis of this program and how the program has been integrated with the Canada Student Saving Program. I think we want to increase the number of students here in Canada. So I would leave it up to parliamentarians to decide on this. I just want to know how you see this. Is there any way that we could improve the bureaucratic nature of the program to improve effectiveness? Ms. Hogan, in your report, were you able to look at whether the communication was good between the federal government and the provincial governments? Because the provinces that communicate with the students and manage the program. On that side, do you feel that there is good communication? Or do you feel that the management of the program is rather fluid? Our audit didn't really look at the aspect of communication between the federal government and the provinces. We focused on how the federal government managed the Canada Education Savings Plan and the loans program. Perhaps one of my colleagues can comment on that. Mr. Le Goff, you may have something you would like to say. This lack of exchange, or do you have any comments? Yes. Good morning, Madam Chair.
Very short answer, please.
Madam Chair, I can assure you that we have no concerns with respect to the collaboration between the federal government and the provinces when it comes to this program. Thank you.
Much for that. Mr. Green for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I have to share that reading this report was actually a pretty difficult thing for me to do. I think back to our briefing that we had with the Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation, and really I'm struggling with the notion that we're even asking the right questions here, Madam Chair, and to members of this committee. Well, so far we've heard about the individual responsibility of students, whether or not they're able to plan for their expenses, their ability to budget. And I'm wondering, you know, when we look at the information, the supports for students on financial assistance, like, is this report fundamentally answering the right questions? And so through you, it's a general question, and forgive me for taking a shot in the dark here, but what analysis went to the flip side of this in terms of the raising costs of tuition, the raising costs of rent, the raising costs of living relative to previous generations' abilities to pay? And was there any analysis put to the ongoing cuts and continued profitability from financializing education in Canada?
Are you asking that question of Ms. Hogan?
No, I guess it would be to people from maybe ESDC or any of the other staffers that are here. It's more of a policy question. I know that Ms. Hogan is responsible for only answering the questions that are provided in the particular study. But Madam Chair, when we look at the default rates and we're positioning this as though somehow this is about students' ability to pay, for me, the biggest elephant in the room is COVID. If we think that this 2019-2020 report is bad, I promise you to wait for the defaults in the years to come. And so I'm wondering if there's been a shift in policy discussion about how to adequately prepare for this.
So maybe, Madam Chair, I can take that one.
Thank you very much.
Indeed, the program has evolved over time in response to the changes you've described. And the most significant change in the evolution was the introduction of the repayment assistance program. So, I mean, effectively, there's two ways you could have come at this at the front end, because as you know, the dominant principle behind this program is to ensure a level playing field between students coming from lower income families and those from families with means. Those from families with means, if they get in trouble a little bit into their career, they get an illness and they can't repay the loan, they're going to have parental support that's going to ensure that that doesn't affect their credit. But for low-income families, they don't have that fallback to turn to. And so there's a high risk, if you just have a loan program, that those individuals will not go to university or higher education because they think they'll be taking too much risk.
Can we pause right there? So on the loan program, what's the typical average interest rate on that?
Tick, can you give the new numbers? Prime
yes.
Plus.
Excuse me. The interest rate right now is prime. It used to be prime plus 2.5. In 2019, it was reduced to prime.
And so that would be right now for the people who might be tuning in?
That is right now. There was the latest on that was that fall economic statement yesterday announced that interest will be eliminated for the next year on Canada student loans.
That's a temporary pause, right? That came out in the fall economic statement, but we know that when that resumes, that it'll go back up. And so I guess my point is that when we have the financialization of education, we're going to have a section that is going to default, likely particularly within the private sector financialization, secondary loans that are covered for the cost of the duration of your education. There's a profitability in that. Do we have any idea about what the financial sector profits from when it comes to the student loan programs?
So there is an option for individuals, I guess, to always go to private sector institutions to seek funding. But I think the way the student loan program is designed is the vast majority of students will come in through the student loan program because of the favorable terms. And just to get back to the repayment assistance program, the reason it's so key is particularly for low-income students, it takes out that risk, which is if it turns out that you're unable to get a job that pays more than $25,000, or if it turns out that you develop an illness or you lose a job, you are going to have the government provide you effectively a deferred grant to cover the costs of interest and principal eventually if necessary. So this is one of the most important features that has evolved over time. And I'd point out that the 20,000 people who would be, or the thousands of people who would be in the repayment assistance program, far from viewing that as a negative factor, we view that as, in fact, the implementation of Parliament's explicit design, which was we want to ensure that for those individuals who don't have that income, we do not require them to repay as long as they don't have that income. So that's one of those features that I think has been critical in ensuring that burden of debt, the fear the individuals have that if I don't get a job that pays well, or if I lose my job, I'm going to lose my credit rating, is taken out of play. That's one of the most important features of the program.
Have there been any policy discussions about how to lower the cost of tuition nationally?
Just a very short answer, Mr. Flack. Thank you.
Tuition levels would be at the provincial level, but as the honorable member would know, in the context of COVID, there have been discussions around many things, including the fact during COVID, we doubled the grants, increased the loan levels people could take. So those discussions remain live, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. And we will now go to our second round of questioning, starting with Mr. Kent. Welcome, Mr. Kent, to the committee, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm delighted to sit in today. Thank you to all of our witnesses. Mr. Flack, continuing from your last answer, and given the various extensions, and this is a question that we discussed at Human Resources, but I think given those who may be watching this committee meeting, students, families, the general public, it is continuing as relevant. But given the various extensions and deferrals of so many government programs, why has ESDC resumed collection activities of the Canada Student Loans? And I've had constituents ask me, is there data showing that student loan borrowers are in a better position than other Canadians to make repayments now than they might be in September 2021? You're on mute, sir.
It's a policy question of government policy, so I'll tread delicately because that would be ultimately for Parliament and the government to decide. But what I can say is the mechanism that has historically been in place to deal with individuals who, whether on a individual basis or on a systemic basis because of a recession, are unable to make their payments, has been the repayment assistance program. So there was an agreement we were able to reach with the provinces for the first 6 months of the pandemic, which they supported because we co-deliver the program with them, to freeze that for that period of time. I would point out that there are a number of provinces who have expressed to us the fact that they would not be interested in extending that, and that would greatly complicate the delivery of this because it's an integrated program on a single platform. But that would ultimately be a policy decision for government. As Atik had indicated, the government has announced in the fall economic update that it will freeze interest for all borrowers in 2021-22.
Well, certainly to encourage repayment, it would help if the National Student Loan Service Center phone line was more capable, had greater capacity. You've seen the news stories. There have been anecdotal complaints of calls being made about unauthorized bank withdrawals, statements showing mispayments, no answers about repayment assistance, and very long wait times. What is being done to increase the capacity of that phone assistance service?
So Atik can talk about the fact that he's managed to double the capacity, and I think we have wait times down to 13 or 14 minutes. But for the honorable member, the key thing that hit us, November is usually the time when we have more people coming in because you start paying your loans 6 months after graduation. So it's normally a peak time. The added thing was, you will recall that there were cyber attacks on a number of government systems. They did not directly affect the Canada Student Loans Program, but there was concern we had that they could affect the system. And as a result of putting additional security measures in, it meant that a considerable number of our clients had to call in to authenticate their accounts. That greatly increased the volume, but we thought it was the prudent thing to do given the risk that their accounts in principle could have been hacked using the similar tools. But Atik, can you give an update on where we are on wait times and your efforts to reduce them?
So the wait time, excuse me. Thank you. The wait time varies a little bit. Some days we have had 15 minutes. Some days we have had up to 25, 30, 35 minutes. Capacity has been increased significantly. More call center agents have been added. One of the challenges have been to get call center agents during this pandemic and train them up and get their security clearance so that they can deal with government data. But given all of that, as I said, the capacity has been significantly increased, and things, what was happening at the beginning is that some students could not even join the queue. That is no longer happening. So things are improving. It will take another few days to get back to normal circumstances.
Thank you. To Mr. Hamilton, and it's good to see you again, sir. It brings back memories of days at Environment and on the China Council. When you speak of the information sharing protocol that's being developed with ESDC, what exactly are the mechanics that will better re-engage delinquent borrowers and encourage repayment activity?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, what we're trying to do is to make sure that the information that's at our disposal shared with the help get a better picture financial individual. And I think that, getting better data on previous tax filings, dependents, obviously income, will help us make better decisions collectively about what we should do. Just to add to a point that Graham made, one of the reasons that this can become time-consuming or more complicated is just to make sure that we are protecting the privacy of the information that we're sharing. And this always comes up when we share people's tax data. And we need to make sure that whatever we do respects that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hamilton. We will now move on to Mr. Blois for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank all the witnesses for their testimony here today. I want to start by saying, very similar to what Mr. Green had said, there are, of course, broader considerations on policy grounds. I want to stick to the auditor's report, and I'm going to start with Deputy Minister Flack. It's great to see you. Great to see someone that has ties to Nova Scotia, being an MP from Nova Scotia. And I want to start by saying this is an important subject, there's no doubt. I went to Exhibit 2.2 of the Auditor General's report, and as I read it, on my quick math, about 85% of the student loan recipients are either repaying or are getting close to having that loan repaid. Obviously, this is an issue for about 15% that we have some work to do. There was a lot of talk in the AG's report about improving the financial literacy tools on the website. I'm a recent graduate of Dalhousie Law School myself, so I went through these programs not that long ago, still enrolled in them, in fact. What measures were already in place to help support students in their understanding? I assume there already was some at the time this report was done. Do you know what those are?
Yeah, so we developed a plan in 2017 with the agency on how to do this. The plan was going to be implemented on the IT platform that our third-party provider has, and that has taken some time given the transformation project they're doing to improve service to students, and things had to be prioritized. So for example, as of November of last year, we had a virtual repayment counselor online. As my colleague has indicated, there's been other tools added, and we've got a new release due in January. So there are new tools to improve the literacy attempt to improve the literacy of students. But if I could just make a plea for those students who are on the repayment assistance program, I wouldn't want to leave folks with the impression that the reason they're on the program is because they're not financially literate. They're on the program because their income is under $25,000. And Parliament said if your income is under $25,000, we're going to help you by paying, if you need it, your interest. So I wouldn't want to leave the impression for the committee that our ultimate end goal is to hope that there is never anyone using the repayment assistance program, because we know in the dynamic economy we have, there are going to be individuals who aren't able to find jobs or who are ill. So I
certainly appreciate that. No, I appreciate it, and that's where I'm coming from as well. Whereas I think students certainly can appreciate this, even if the tools are there or not. It's about having the means to be able to repay these programs. I want to go. The Auditor General had recommended, of course, that there are some individuals that find their way into the RAP program that perhaps might not meet the criteria, and suggested that there's some work to be done to try to maintain the integrity of that program. Have you weighed, Deputy Minister Flack, the cost of trying to provide that extra supervision versus what the savings may be, or perhaps some of the interest that might be accrued from having a few individuals that might get in that program that might not otherwise qualify?
Well, as we indicated in our response, we do think it's worth pursuing what we started with the provinces in 2017, which is the work with the CRA to be able to gather the CRA data. So we think that that has a good cost-benefit analysis, a good return on investment, particularly for people who are in the program for an extended period of time, where looking back at their tax records from prior years would be helpful. Where we have the greatest challenge in the program is the entry requirement is that the individual in that month had an income that was below, on an annualized basis, $25,000 a year. And as members would know, we do not require Canadians to file taxes every month. So there is no real-time information that Revenue Canada have, or we have, that shows what the monthly income of each individual is. So when they suffer a sudden event and lose the income, that's where we have to use imperfect methods like pay stubs and attestations.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I want to go quickly to the Canada Learning Bond. That was something that was mentioned. You mentioned it in your remarks earlier as a tool to help support lower income families in the country. The AG report found that there's not as much of an uptake. What are some of the measures that you're thinking about to be able to have more Canadians that would be eligible for this program as a tool to try to help offset some of the additional costs with post-secondary education?
I think one of the great success stories over the last decade is the increase in the uptake for that program. Individuals do have to open accounts, but we have had, through a whole bunch of efforts, nudge methods, mail outs, other forms of communications, a big increase in the program. One of the options that has been mooted is a kind of reverse onus position, which is rather than requiring individuals to set up an account for their kids, could you have a situation where if that low-income child was going to university, they would automatically be able to access the resources. That's not a policy that's been pursued to date, but if one wanted to maximize the availability, that would be the way to do it. There are going to be limits to what we can do in terms of even for RRSPs or RESPs, how many people are willing to take those up and set them up themselves.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flack. We will now move to what I'm going to call our rapid round of questioning, the 2.5-minute round, starting with Mr. Blanchet-Jonca.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have questions for the CRA. I'm quite surprised in point 8 in the AG's report, which says that the CRA didn't have the necessary tools for recovery when borrowers were in default and that the time had expired for collection. This is what amount was recovered. Service Canada can't determine this. So my question to the CRA is there any communication between EDSC and CRA?
Oui, Madame la Présidente.
Yes, Madam Chair. I apologize. My microphone was up too high and I found it hard to hear, but I think I've resolved the problem now. It's important to acknowledge that this program has different rules than the general income tax system. It's easier.
Mr. Hamilton.
But we do work with the ESDC.
I'm sorry, we're getting both the interpretation and your language of choice. Have you chosen the language?
Is it working okay now? Okay. So to continue, we do work with the ESDC to ensure that we have as much information as possible from the student, but clearly the process is different. The collection process is different for us. It's different than the normal income tax collection process. And I think that the AG mentioned in a report that this needs to be improved. Thank you for that clarification, Madam Chair. I can't. $2.2 billion over 5 years was lost for non-recovery of debts. What about the honest taxpayers? How is it that we can't get $2.3 billion, but we are able to get 5 cents from taxpayers? So what do we need to do for the CRA so that it can work effectively?
Mr. Hamilton, thank you.
I'm not on mute. Okay. I think what's important for us is that we get as much information as possible in the area of debt collection. There is a certain delay in obtaining information. That's a barrier. So information is sharing is very important in this sector. However, generally speaking, we do have a good process for recovering the amounts necessary. We are also discussing this issue with students as well.
Very much. We will now move to Mr. Green, 2.5 minutes.
Earlier in the interventions, we heard a comparison with 2004, 2003 era about how the default rates have dropped considerably since that day. And I'm wondering, I recall that's actually my vintage. That would have been when I graduated. I graduated from Acadia. Shout out to Mr. Blois. And tuition there was expensive at the time. It was like $3,500. That would barely cover the cost of books today. And I also recall that people in my cohort knew that if they defaulted and claimed bankruptcy, that their debt would be forgiven. Has there been a change? I believe there was a change. And if so, in what ways are you referencing that change in terms of the way people are now continuing to be shackled to this debt?
I'll start, Madam Chair, but Atiq may have more on the question of forgiveness. So the default rate has come down steadily. Just to give you the numbers, it was 28%.
Sorry, that's you're just repeating your original answer. The question was, do you believe from a policy perspective, the reason why people defaulted 15 years ago is because when they had to declare bankruptcy because of the absolute burden of student debt, that once they declared bankruptcy, that loan was forgiven. Do I understand it correct now that even in bankruptcy, people still have to pay these loans?
Atiq?
Yes, thank you. So the rule right now is it's the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act that has this provision that student loans are not discharged when someone declares bankruptcy. If they declare bankruptcy within 7 years of leaving school, it's not discharged. If it is after 7 years, it would be. So in that sense, it does stay. The loan survives bankruptcy.
That's what I thought on that. And I just want to put that out there to caution us using these past retroactive successes when really what it did back then was force people to claim bankruptcy. Now they can't get out of it that way. But I do want to talk about the reverse onus, which I think Mr. Flack brought up, which I do agree upon. And I want to state on the record now that if Mr. Blois, in bringing that up, wanted to work on a private members bill that created an automatic opt-in for low-income people, folks to reverse the onus to allow them to access this program, I would be happy to work alongside him and any members of government to make this happen for students. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. We will now move to our next round of questioning, 5 minutes, starting with Mr. Berthold.
Actually, Madam Chair, it's going to be myself there. Thank you. Perfect.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence.
Okay, so Mr. Flack, I was just a little bit challenged by one of your responses in the fact that you didn't seem to have any motivation to decrease the default rate, and maybe I heard you wrong. So maybe you could just clarify that quickly if that's not correct.
Yeah, we have every motivation to reduce the default rate, and we have by a point every year. So it's gone from 28% default to, in the latest year, 8%.
Okay, just
what I was referring to was in terms of the repayment assistance program. That is a separate program that Parliament put in place to say for individuals who have an income below that level, you should support them by covering their payments. But the default rate has come down, it continues to come down, and we are very focused on that.
Okay, so one of the Auditor General's things she pointed out, was that you were using a default rate of 9%, but in fact there are much more fulsome numbers that are, I think, more useful to Parliament and arguably more predictive, such as a 14% non-payment rate there. Yes, why don't you provide more non-payment rates? So. And do you agree with the AG's number of 14%?
We do provide those rates. And so if you add them together, you do get that larger number. But we report on the value in both the public accounts and in the annual Canada Student Loan Report on the value of the grants we provide, on the value of the repayment assistance program, and on the default and the cost of the default. All three of those are reported on. Our point is merely the repayment assistance program is a parliamentary decree that we shall provide benefits to people if they meet those conditions, and that's what we do, which is why we do not characterize them as losses, nor do we think they're properly characterized as losses.
Okay, I don't mean to cut you off, but you have repeated that same line several times, and my time is short. The other number, I think there's a bit of an equity issue here. I think of many students who don't make access to the RAP program, that some that are probably earning less than $25,000 that are still paying their student loans diligently. What is the number I would like to know is that is the following: what is the percentage of total student loans that are completely repaid without any assistance from RAP or similar programs? So what percentage of students are fully paying their loans without any assistance from government?
Tick, do you have that number?
We could get precise numbers, but for example, 8%, as Graham mentioned, go into default. There are about 25 to 30% who end up using repayment assistance plan. So, I mean, roughly speaking, if you use that, the rest of them are paying off their loans without either defaulting or using repayment assistance plan. But we could get more precise numbers for sure.
Okay, so in reality, we have more like 30 or 40% of student loans are students that are not repaying their debts fully, which I think is a substantial issue. And then we add that to the fact that the value of outstanding loans, and this is not including the RAP program in default, was $2.3 billion. Just to give you context, that would pay for both the Canadian Sickness Recovery Benefit and the Canadian Caregiver Benefit. In 2018 and 2019, the federal government wrote off $160 million in student debt, despite the fact that legally they don't have to, as unrecoverable. I obviously do not, students are having enough time through COVID, but I want to understand from an audit perspective, why are we writing this money off? Is there not a better way to do this? I think this is to Mr. Hamilton, if he's involved in collections. If Mr. Flack, you're in a better place, please jump in position to answer it, but either one of you.
Perhaps I'll start, and Graham may want to add. But in recovery, the job that we have is after the loan has not been paid for 9 months, it comes to us to try to collect. And we have various ways that we can go out and try to collect that money. And if at the end of that process, we just decide it is not recoverable for one reason or another, bankruptcy, you name the circumstances, then we recommend to ESDC that loan be written off, and then there's a process that follows at ESDC and ultimately to Treasury Board. But I'll ask Graham if he wants to add to that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hamilton. I'm afraid Mr. Lawrence's time is up. Perhaps in another line of questioning, this can come back. I will turn it over to Ms. Yip for 5 minutes.
Thank you all for coming, and I would like to hear Mr. Flack's answer to the previous question.
Sorry, yeah. There is also a legal obligation after government debts are unrecoverable for 7 years that we move to write off as well. The write-off approach is part of all of our collection activities where benefits are provided and they're not ultimately recoverable by individuals. An analysis is made of the recoverability after those efforts are made. And when they aren't, we are obliged to write those off. And we do report those to the Treasury Board. And they have, as a percentage of the total value of the student loan account, been Mark, is it about 1%? Is that the right?
Yes, it's hovering about the 1% rate.
It's been a little lower the last 2 years, but that's been pretty constant over time. That 1% of total value of the book would get written off any given year.
Thank you. The OAG found that the ESDC did not offer enough tools to help students understand their financial obligations under the CSLP. In 2014, ESDC established a statement of work for the service provider that specified that students must have support throughout the loan process so that they can make sound financial decisions. The initial plan was to provide support starting in April 2018, but the implementation date was postponed a first time to March 2019. The department later told the OAG that it was planning a gradual implementation up to 2021. Why is there such a delay? Why is it taking 7 years for this plan to be implemented?
Atik, you've been managing the project. Did you want to give the update on what that involved?
Yes, sure. So 2014 was when the request for proposal went out. That was not when the contract was actually signed. The contract was finalized in 2016 and was expected to be operational in 2018. That got delayed because just to make sure that we had an error-free disbursement of student loans and grants. And at the same time, over the last few years, a number of changes have been implemented on the Canada Student Loans Program because of the enhancements that the government has announced. That also had some impact on the service provider's capacity to do both at the same time. Those are the reasons why we had to reschedule the transformation initiative slightly.
Can you tell us what this plan is about?
Sorry, the plan of giving them more information, that's what you are referring to?
Yes.
So it is what our colleague from Financial Consumer Agency has already touched on, providing more information with respect to financial literacy. So there is already a virtual repayment counselor that was already launched last year, where students can go and look at different repayment options, and depending on their current situation at the time, select which option they would like to choose and get bit more information on that. And at the same time, we have continued to put on more information in their individual dashboards on the portal, as well as publicly accessible part of the portal with respect to budgeting and expense management and things like that.
There doesn't seem to be a lot of students accessing this portal, and some stakeholders have recommended mandatory training for students before they sign the loan agreements after they either complete their studies or they leave a program. Do you feel that this would help increase financial literacy? It's somewhat similar to in high school. Maybe not financial literacy, but students are required to do 40 hours of volunteer work, and they can't graduate until they do that. Do you feel that this would be beneficial, having a mandatory training for students?
Atik, why don't I start? So we have been in discussion with the provinces around that, because were we to have mandatory training, that would require legislative change at the federal and provincial level. The US is the jurisdiction we looked at that did put this in place, and the academic literature around their program is that that has not resulted in better outcomes. It's an online program that everyone has to take. People sort of figure out what the answers are, look them up online, and it doesn't appear to have a long-term impact. So what we are working with the provinces to do is to test viable options, because they would probably be the front line delivering this, for this type of training to determine what would actually work and improve outcomes. So I think before recommending we move to the minister to mandatory training, we would want to be very, very confident that there was a return on investment on that, and it wasn't just a burden on individuals without any improved results in terms of the outcomes. But that's what we intend to test.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flack. I will now move to the next round of questioning, which is our 6-minute round, starting with Mr. Kent.
Thank you, Chair. And to the Auditor General, Ms. Hogan, if you were, and given the recommendations that you make in your report, but if you were to design a system which you would consider more effective, both in terms of dealing with loans being made and the re-engagement and repayment of those loans, what would it be?
Well, that's an excellent question. I'm not sure I'm probably the best person to find that result. I guess I would want to start, however, with understanding why individuals who are in the repayment assistance program are perhaps unable to make the payments, whether they be reduced or not. Our audit did note that in 2019, about half of the individuals in the repayment assistance program had not made any payments in 4 years. So perhaps it's the design of the program. Perhaps it's some financial literacy. Perhaps a combination of other elements. So before I would attempt to try and tell you how to design a program, I'd really want to understand why the current program has the outcomes it has in order to be well informed.
Is that the sort of information that you would request from either ESDC or the CRA?
Well, it's the sort of information I would encourage them to gather and analyze in order to be able to make recommendations for any changes that might be needed to the program.
With regards to the recommendation regarding information sharing, were there specifics that you included with that recommendation that you could share with us, or was that a general proposal?
No, it was a general proposal that stemmed from our finding that there were individuals who had revenue higher than the threshold and were admitted into the repayment assistance program. Recognizing that having that historical information is just one piece of information that you need, and that together CRA and ESDC should share the information they need to make the best well-informed decision about who should be admitted and whether or not they should be given reduced payments.
Now, in your work across government, looking into programs administered by all departments, what are your recommendations regarding the point made by Mr. Flack to the frailty, the vulnerability of our data protection in the federal government?
I'm actually looking to start some work in perhaps a year or so that looks at the protection of information on the cloud. I think, like any organization, the federal government is subject to people who try to access our data sets, our servers with bad intentions. And so I do think it's important that we take the time to ensure that taxpayers' information is protected both from external hackers, but also following the rules of Privacy and Information Act.
Mm-hmm. Chair, I still have a couple of minutes.
Yes, you do, sir. You have 2.5 minutes.
Super, thank you. Well, then, to Commissioner Robertson and the literacy training which you support, I'm wondering what elements of prudence and I suppose the use of loans is included in that literacy. As the Auditor General pointed out, and you pointed out, a major student loan is generally the first serious debt that many young people face. And we know, again, anecdotally, that some borrow beyond their absolute needs in terms of their education.
Yes, thank you for that that message. The information that is now included on the portal, and more generally by us, but also by others, does focus, I think, where you're getting at, which is on the prevention side, or the before you commit side. Know what you're getting into and make an informed decision about, is this the best way to pay for your education? So we actually have a section on paying for your education, in addition to a section on repaying. So trying to get at both ends, the going in and then the repayment of the loan.
And with regards to those who are delinquent over a period of years, as mentioned by the Auditor General, again, what advice is offered to those who may think that they can simply not repay that loan one way or another?
Is that a question for me?
Well, it is, yes. I mean, consequences.
Oh, so as far as specifically to the Canadian Student Loan Program, we are not the ones supplying information on the requirements of the program. That would be to the program itself. We do, however, have more general information on what to do when you get in trouble and how you can access services to provide assistance like credit counseling and so on in order to find a path to a better future.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Kemp. We will move on to Mr. Sobera.
Thank you, Chair. It's great to be here this morning. First, a quick question for the Commissioner, the CRA Commissioner. In terms of the opening remarks, with regards to the specific audit recommendation, ESDC is working with CRA to establish an information sharing agreement expected by spring of 2021. Obviously, we know that COVID-19 has put a large burden and asked a lot from CRA and its amazing employees. And I just wanted to confirm that still of spring of 2021 is still on track, and that an appropriate work plan has been developed and still there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take a stab at this, and my ESDC colleagues may want to add. But yes, we have been in train of trying to get this information sharing done. As far as I'm aware, we're still on track for March. I think, as Graham indicated earlier, COVID has changed the timing of some things, and we've had to be adaptable and flexible. But my understanding is we are on track.
Thank you. That's perfect. Auditor General, and I think this will go to, I believe, ESDC on the credit bureau situation with regards to some borrowers having their credit report or credit number impacted. And at first glance, like, you know, these individuals going through university, taking on some debt, potentially in the form of these loans, then finding themselves in a very difficult situation. And we know how important the credit score is when you go to the bank and go and purchase a house, excuse me, a car, so forth. How are we looking at that from a holistic point of view? How is ESDC and anybody else can chime in looking at that, and also from the Financial Consumer Agency standpoint on terms of the education process? How are we looking at the credit aspect of it? Because we don't want to penalize youth right off the bat coming out of university or college and finding themselves in a difficult position.
So maybe I can start on that. I think the core principle behind the program is that those individuals who have the means to be able to pay should repay according to the schedule that was laid out. And those individuals who suffer an economic event or a health event that prevents them from being able to do so, or has a growing family that makes their income at a level where they'd be spending more than 20% of their income on the repayments, that they should not be required to be paid. So the way we get at the credit rating fundamentally is by relieving the burden for those who don't have the ability to pay. But for those who do have the ability to pay, when they fail to make a payment, each time that happens, that's reported through our third-party provider to the credit agencies, and it stays on their record for up to 6 years until such time as they repay.
Okay. Is there any other further color from anyone, or can I move on to the next question? No comment. The one thing that I gleamed off of the Auditor General's comments at the beginning, Ms. Hogan, was that 62% of eligible children did not receive it as of 2018 because no account had been opened for them, and I'm speaking in reference to the Canada Learning Bond. Is there any consideration in terms of adopting, and I think you may have alluded to this earlier, and I apologize if I missed it, to what's called a negative option billing on this one here, where the folks that really need the Canada Learning Bond are almost automatically enrolled in the program, so we can assist those individuals to getting an education for their children?
So that would indeed be an option. It would ultimately be for government to decide if it wanted to pursue it, but it's certainly one of the things we've looked at. We have significantly increased the percentage of people who have opened the accounts, but we do think there's going to be an upper limit to how far that goes. So the negative option would be a way you would not penalize a child if their parents had not taken the decision to open this free account. But that would be a policy decision for a government to take.
This last number was 2018, Mr. Flack. Do we have an updated number as of 2020 or 19?
A tick? I don't think we do yet, do we?
No, that's the last number we have so far.
And my last question, Chair, and this probably will take me to my time. In reading the Auditor General's Spring 2020 report on page 15, recommendation 2.48, in terms of we have a program in place. The program is there to encourage and ensure individuals have access to an education. And one barometer of measuring that is, looking at the participation rate and fundamentally asking the question: does this program increase the participation rate of youth accessing post-secondary education? And we know how important that is for human capital development, for an economy to move forward. On that, there is a department's response, and I really, Mr. Flack, if you can elaborate, comment on this, because there is department plans to start an in-depth CESP evaluation in spring 2020 to assess the interaction of the CSP, and I look forward to seeing this report, and I believe it's the spring in 2020. I look forward to seeing this report when it is done. If you can comment on that, because I think this is incredibly important.
So,
I'm sorry, Mr. Flack, I'm going to ask you to keep your answer very short, as Mr. Sobera was correct. His question did take the rest of his time.
We're thrilled to now have the data sets merged after 3 years of hard work, and are looking forward to putting that to work in being able to get that more granular conclusion you're seeking.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flack. We will now go to Mr. Blanchette-Jonca.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My next comments will be for the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. Ms. Robertson, in your opening statement, you said that the role of the agency was primarily to improve financial literacy of Canadians through tools and resources designed to help consumers. And you also stated that consumers, and an informed consumer is a better protected consumer. I agree with you. However, when I look at your conclusion, 1 out of 2 people, 40% to be exact, borrowers who contract loans don't know that during the last year of their students that the interest will start being charged as soon as they finish their studies. So you contract a loan and you don't even know until the last final year when the interest is going to kick in. What do you think of that? What do you think of this observation made by the Auditor General?
Merci beaucoup de cette question.
Thank you for your question.
That it is, first let me correct or put a nuance. Our mandate is to protect consumers when we do it in 2 ways. Financial literacy is one way, but it is a major focus of ours. Nobody knows better than we do the challenge for delivering effective financial literacy program and actually achieving the outcomes that you say. So I would say my reaction to the Auditor General's report is that it's a fair assessment and it points us in the direction of the work that needs to be done and is quite honestly not an unusual outcome at this stage, but we are finding over time, as I say, through our research and experimentation, more and more effective ways to try to improve those results.
Thank you, Ms. Robertson, for that clarification. We know that we have work to do, and there seems to be a lot of goodwill on your part. there was a virtual service for counseling people that enables people who get a loan to have information required with respect to their student loan. And do you have any data since this virtual service was launched? Are people using this tool? Has there been any type of adjustment? Can you elaborate, please?
Because that is the system run by ESDC, so that's not information that comes back to us. So I cannot provide you with information on that.
Tick, do you have early data on the results of the virtual assistant?
So we have number of page views, number of students visiting those pages, different pages that we have launched. Those numbers we do have. Yes, I don't have that on me right now, but we have those numbers.
Madame la Présidente, serait possible.
Madam Chair, would it be possible to get a written answer from the department to ensure that this virtual counselor is working well and help students that have loans? That would be very interesting to find this out. With respect, Madam Commissioner, on the recommendations 2.40 with respect to the portal and the National Student Loan Center, can you tell us, I know that we don't have all the data available now, but could you forward any information about this project to give the department access to information on the web? And what about the mandatory training for students training that they would have to be able to take before they could get a loan from the student loan program?
Currently on the portal, we're very pleased with the results, and we were consulted and provided direct feedback, not just on the content, but also on the form, because as we know, how and when and what color, even where it is on the screen, makes a difference to whether it is accessible and meaningful. As far as the proposal or the suggestion to require mandatory training, we are open and eager to collaborate again with ESDC on this. I think the focus we would have would be on trying to develop ways of ensuring effective training and making it mandatory may be part of that, maybe not be. It deserves some consideration.
Merci.
Thank you for that, Ms. Robertson. What tools would you like to have available to improve financial literacy? Mandatory training, virtual service? The Auditor General's report was quite forthcoming. 1 out of 2 people don't know that they're going to be charged interest as soon as they finish their studies. So I'm trying to come up with some way that's effective so that people have the information when they enter into a contract. Sometimes people don't always read between the lines, but it's serious. This will have an impact on their life.
Completely
a very short answer, Ms. Robertson.
Sure. So my short answer is that I think this is a wonderful opportunity to experiment and try some pilot projects, which we are well positioned to facilitate.
Thank you so much. We will now move to Mr. Green for 6 minutes as our last questioner today.
Thank you very much. And I still have to, I'll end this session by saying I'm still very uncomfortable about all the time and energy we have to means testing, putting individual onus on people without really thinking deeply about the systems that are in place, the wholly inadequate systems that are currently in place to provide education for our workforce, which of course is, one of the key cornerstones of our economy. And we've heard, students be categorized as consumers. And I would agree that the financialization, the privatization, the increasing capitalization of education pits them in that direction. And we've heard a lot about, financial literacy, but I'll put to Ms. Robinson, who I believe is in charge of this. Given everything that we've heard in the report, Ms. Hogan states that it doesn't cover any assistance to students related to the pandemic. However, the pandemic is a compounding factor that has come into play, and it will cause market conditions to worsen, thereby limiting the prospects of young adults. So for young people who are watching, who graduated into one of the worst and precarious economies prior to COVID, knowing that COVID is going to be a compounding factor, if you were to give financial advice to people looking for secondary education, would you even advise them to pursue it at this point?
Our role, of course, is not about providing advice on whether to pursue higher education. Although we do have some research showing the benefits over a lifetime of educational achievement, it's been a very difficult time. We understand completely. And we've got some more research coming out on our monthly report, which should help guide for future policy directions on the specific effects of COVID by specific demographics.
Well, I just, I've heard today the idea of, and I often agree with my friend, Mr. Blanchet-Jonca, but this idea of mandatory training, this idea of financial literacy is somehow going to provide answers to people who happen to be living in poverty, happen to be living in one of the most precarious job and employment environments, who have absolutely no control over the economic outcomes of COVID, will in any way, shape, or form alleviate the compounded pressure of student debt. Like, would you care to comment on that assertion?
Well, I will say completely that although we are passionate about financial literacy and the importance of it, not just for students, but for people throughout their lives, we also don't fool ourselves that financial literacy is the solution to all problems.
Thank you. I will accept that because, of course, it was a rhetorical device that we use politically. Because, I'm going to say this to the committee that I'm still challenged by this. I challenge every person over 50 to think about what they paid in tuition relative to their ability to earn through summer jobs and through immediate employment, relative to the cost of living that they had decades ago, and then compare it in real terms to today's economy. And so, I feel like this report, in as many ways in which it's been explored today, still fails to answer the fundamental questions that young people are facing in this economy based on education. And so now I want to get to the end of the cycle of debt recovery. And I want to ask the question through you, Madam Chair. We've heard, and I put this about the way people used to use bankruptcy to discharge their debt. What happens now after 7 years when it's been written off? In his easy way possible to explain it. This isn't to Ms. Robinson. This is to ESDC or whomever would be responsible for that.
Atiq?
So yes, once the loan is written off, that doesn't actually, the loan is not forgiven. The debt still survives.
So here's a question. Here's an economics question, and I'm really struggling with this. I know we're in fractional reserve banking. I know that we borrow money into existence. How is it that this government can simultaneously write off the debt, it disappears, and the debt still remain on another balance sheet for a third-party collector and the person who owes it?
If I could just add, and Mark, you might be more useful here. I don't think it stays with the third-party collector at this point. There is no active collection after that point once it is written off.
But if you've written it off your books, then how is it that the people who owe it still have it on their liability? How does it exist at two places at the same time?
So the way it works is that the consequences of having a loan written off is that they will no longer receive another student loans and grants. If they want to apply for another one, they will have to.
Does it still show up as a liability on the government's books?
Mark, you might be more useful there.
So the answer to that question, no, it does not. It is not actively pursued, but as Atiq mentioned, we do keep the record. So if the person does want to pay,
but it's not if it's not a liability on the government's book, like this to me is the Ponzi scheme that we have in capitalist debt financing. Is that companies, whether it's the government or the pernicious payday loans that we have here, work on a continuum of debt that appears and disappears and reappears in so many different ways to the advantage of the financier instead of the person who's actually receiving the debt And I'm just wondering, if there couldn't be a more equitable way in which debt is transferred. And so once it's discharged, you're going to go on there, like there's no more collections after that?
Very, very short answer, please.
So once the loan is written off, there are no more active collection activities that take place.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. And thank you, members, for your very thoughtful questions and observations. I'd like to thank our witnesses for joining us today and would now invite you to leave the meeting as we move into some committee business. Madam Clerk, is the room clear?
Yes, I believe it's just the members now.
Okay. Colleagues, thank you very much for allowing for this quick little bit of committee business that we need to take care of before December 10th. We have 3 meetings left until the House rises for the Christmas break, and we still don't have anything scheduled for one of those meetings, the date that I just mentioned, December 10th. In the proposed calendar, we had recommended studying either the report on respect in the workplace from the fall of 2019 or oversight of Government of Canada advertising from the spring of 2019. However, in discussions with the Treasury Board, the clerk has learned that they would not be available to appear on December 10th. So I'm wondering if the committee would wish to move forward with a study on respect in the workplace on December 10th. And if there are any thoughts on that, please raise your hand. I see Mr. Blanchette-Jonca.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a simple clarification. I had a question about the next meeting. I wanted to ensure that the clerk got the action plans for our additional meeting on electronic taxation. I don't want to lose sight of that so that we can do our work properly next Thursday.
Would you be able to provide him with an answer?
Yes. I received the English version yesterday. I'm waiting for the French translation. So I think I should be getting it by the end of the day. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jonca. Mr. Longfield.
Yeah, I was looking forward to the workplace study. So given that that's our choice of one now, I'd like to move ahead with it.
Are there any other interventions by members?
Mr. Longfield would like to intervene, or Mr. Lawrence, excuse me.
I
Thank
would
you. Go ahead, Mr.
I would
Lawrence.
generally like to disagree with my Liberal candidate, but as we are our colleague, I should say, but as we are at a choice of one and we are at public accounts, we're supposed to be nonpartisan. I will agree to his learned intervention.
Thanks. We'll get you working on my campaign yet.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence. Anyone else? If there is no further discussion.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I just might remind members, I sent an email yesterday asking if members would be amenable to taking the last half hour of Thursday's meeting to go in camera to talk about future business after the Christmas break. I've received a few responses, but not from everyone. So I just wonder if there's consensus to do that. Then I'll make the proper arrangements so that the committee can do it.
Thank you very much for that reminder, Angela. Yes, if those members who did not respond to the clerk's email would indicate here and now if they are amenable to us taking the last half an hour, we would appreciate being able to try and get our calendar in order for after Christmas to some degree. So can you all raise your hands if you're in favor? Give us a thumbs up. I see thumbs up. Great. Madam Clerk, I think you have your answer.
Madam Chair.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I know it's a second part of a study that we'd already embarked on, so we are hopeful that we won't be taking our members' time for questions. So with no further discussion, next Tuesday, December 8th, the committee will meet in camera to study draft reports, and you will be receiving these drafts by Friday so that you can prepare for the meeting. And with that, is it the will of the committee to adjourn the meeting? Thumbs up again. Thank you very much, colleagues. It was a great meeting. Enjoy the rest of your day.